and Hove, and they built the same website, but with some extra bits. And then they moved to Croydon. Guess what they did? Built the same website again. And this is, local government money. You're repeating the same thing again. And, even if you're developing your own sites, you reuse lots of code, you do lots of stuff. But why should it be kept to just these councils? Shouldn't it be shared to any of the local authorities? Because they're all having to build very similar sites, bring them out, and roll them out each time. And so there's one person who's called Will, who is kind of the driving force for a lot of this. And going to the session yesterday about funding, he went to the central government and got some funding to actually start building this into a thing that could be reused and shared across councils and things. And so there was a fair bit of central government funding to get things started, but to keep things going, no. That needed a different model. So again, from the keynote yesterday, the idea has been to build a co-op, so a cooperative, so it's a members co-op, where the councils and the suppliers can join, and they pay in a fee, or they pay in hours. Am I about right?
Yeah.
I do less of this.
Yeah. So the initial funding came from the local digital fund, which is central government. But it's worth mentioning that Croydon and Brighton were up for sharing their code between each other first. They were like, oh, we've developed this Drupal site. Yeah, you can copy the code if you want, but it wasn't really very generic. It was quite specific to Brighton. So the initial funding from the local digital fund, which is central government funding, was to explore how to genericize it, create a code that could be shared with other councils. But yeah, alpha, beta, microsites, we did have about, significant money, like maybe £500,000 in total, £500,000 by the end. But yeah, then we did need to find a way to stand on our own 2 feet, as it were, and continue the collaboration, which is where the membership and subscriptions come in.
So some of those members, so the councils, and so these are all councils that are using it and paying membership. There are actually more councils than this definitely using the system who aren't members. So, you can freeload, but you don't get a lot of the community stuff unless you've joined membership. So that's so far, and it's growing fast. So that's just me taking a screenshot from the website, which is linked at the end. And it's got all the councils in it at the moment.
So we've got nearly 50 councils, I think, at the moment, out of 400 odd councils in the UK. So a significant proportion are coming over to Drupal and LocalGov Drupal.
And yeah, some of them were already using open source solutions. Some of them were Drupal already, but quite a lot of them have been moving from license model websites where they have it's really painful to watch. They have so little control over getting new features, even though they're paying a license fee and they're paying quite a lot of money. They don't really have any way of, getting new features into the website. So they, kind of plead to the distributor, which will not be named on high, to add a new feature, and it might happen or it might not, and it's quite often a bit of a mess. But yeah, they're moving from closed source solutions that had license fee model to an open source solution where they pay, optionally voluntary membership to get more involvement in the distribution, and some of them are doing it all in-house and they have their own development teams, and some of them are going out to suppliers. And this is also, this is kind of impressive. If you don't know the sort of like the agency scene in the UK, some of these names might not be so well clear to you. Anatech, you probably will know, the sponsors of the DrupalCon quiz social night, if nothing else. But Big Blue Door, TPX Impact, and Zucha are kind of big agencies that also subcontract stuff off elsewhere. So they're all working on the same code base, and they've all actually joined and signed up to the community.
And given money to support the project, the LocalGov Drupal, so paying subscribers, putting money in the pot, collaborating, and helping to grow the distribution, which is great.
So unlike some other similar sort of solutions, there isn't one agency that's controlling this. The co-op is driving it, and agencies are subscribing in. Agencies are adding in code or suggesting stuff. So a small agency, the slash and the thing is chicken. And they were working with one of the councils. One of the councils wanted a publication system, so they've developed a publication system and contributing it back. So yeah, that's kind of impressive. And yeah, that community is in reality built around a Slack. And the Slack has not only got developers in it, it's got the content people in it. So it's got the people from the councils, it's got the people from the suppliers. They talk openly about stuff. They come in and say, has anyone from another council had to put in a funding application for something? There's just general conversations about things that you need to do about websites. And so you have developers in there, you've got content editors in there, you've got people who are doing management in there. And there's just general conversations and then channels about it. My anecdote for this is getting a little bit old, but back before the Queen died, there was discussion with the content people who realised there's a protocol called London Bridge. And what that means is, should a notable person die in the United Kingdom, all the websites, all government agencies everywhere have to announce this really prominently. And so word had got out, there were people chatting in the Slack, and so they were sort of saying, what are your preparations? And some people had worked it out, they knew what they needed to do. We'll see the module used in a moment. But they were chatting, and so they'd worked out, and they shared the information about how to get prepared for the moment that the Queen dies. And I can tell you that lots of the local gov councils had everything in place and up before lots of the central government websites, because they were just, they knew it was coming, they talked about it, they prepared, and so the content people had no problem, they didn't need to panic, everything was set up, problem solved. So that community and those people talking makes a huge difference. And then on the more strategic level, the community is built around, because it's a co-op, it's then built around different steering groups. So there's a content group who are also deciding what kind of features they might want. There's a technical group, which we're both on, actually decide some of the more, what patterns are we using, what are we repeating, what are we not doing, where are we pushing back from the product people. But a lot of stuff actually just gets brought in by outside people. We'll talk about that again. And we also, for the code, and this is quite kind of good, we have a regular, once a week meeting that anyone can drop into, and we go through all the pull requests and go through them and see if somebody should be reviewing them. So there's a constant process. But if someone wants to come in and lobby for their merge request, they can turn up on a Tuesday. It used to be Merge Monday, which worked much better. It's now Merge Tuesday. But people can come in and lobby for that, or see if they can find someone to review it, and we discuss it, get it merged, and then on a Tuesday afternoon, or in the Slack, there's all of a sudden a whole load of new releases of modules that have come out. Is there anything else on that sort of strategic steering group
Well, then
process stuff?
We've got the Open Digital Co-op board there as well, which is the actual company, and we have a board of directors on the company who are elected from the membership, and so they kind of oversee the direction and the funding and that sort of stuff. But yeah, no. The regular meetings on Merge Tuesdays is now kind of like where the real stuff happens, and that's great.
Yep, and there are a growing number of people who just do drop in. There's also a drop-in as well for tech people. So you get there's some of the councils have got huge dev teams and loads of money. Some of them have got 2 chaps in a cupboard who are running their own servers, and they have to do everything, including the printers. So there's everything from one end to the other, and then they can drop in and talk about things or features and get advice and all the rest of it. And this is also but if any of you've worked with government, it's really difficult to get people to contribute, take part, share, all that kind of stuff. It's hard. And so this is, I think, a piece of genius, which definitely came out of Will's knowledge of how the local authorities and government's working. So everyone who joins signs this memorandum of understanding, which technically has no legal standing whatsoever. It's non-binding. But what it does do is mean that the management have to have a discussion about joining in and committing to actually allow their staff from there on to go into the Slack channel and chat and share information. And when they write code, to publish it on GitHub, GitLab, Drupal.org, wherever, and share it. So at the beginning, they had the discussion, management panicked, but they've got it out the way, and then the developers and the content people are free to go on and actually do their bloody jobs and share the stuff that's working.
Yeah, because we have to remember, like in government procurement, in local government procurement, the idea of open source is still kind of, difficult. Like, how do we procure open source services? Like, if we're investing money in building some code, like why would we share it with somebody else? Like, so it's really important to get this out of the way at the beginning. Like, yes, we're going to work on open source code. We're going to use open source code. We're also going to pay money to build open source code, and we're going to share it. So that's really important. The MOU is kind of like setting that baseline of expectations of working in the open, sharing the code that we develop, and it's public money. It should be public code. So it's great to have that level of expectation at the beginning of the engagement.
And it's been written out in the appropriately legalese type of wording, but I think it's more the decision that gets made and the freedom that it then gives people. There are links on the bottom of the slide that are about down there. The slides are on GitHub pages, and there's a link at the end. So if you want to pull up the link to the Memorandum of Understanding, it is on the LocalGovDrupal.org website, and there is a link, and you can pull it all up. So I will show you the thing. So that is, in essence, the community bit of it, and that's what's been driving it, and that's kind of what makes it completely different. It's not the code, it's the community and how it's actually got all these people working together. Are there any specific questions on that one anyone wants to do now before I show stuff that do some of the sharing of the code? Cool.
I would just mention briefly, we also had a LocalGov Drupal camp in Brighton, Birmingham, a couple of weeks ago, which was great. There was about 100 plus people there, and it felt very like the early days of sort of Drupal and Drupal camps, like from sort of people getting really excited about seeing each other in person and collaborating on code and stuff. So but specifically around LocalGov Drupal. So that was great.
Again, it's pulling. It's actually one of the nice things about Drupal events. It pulls in front end people, back end people, content people. You've got, it's not all just developers. So you've got everyone sharing, and you're getting a bigger picture. and taking part.
And a lot of people who've never heard of Drupal before, LocalGov Drupal is them finding out about Drupal and then asking all the kind of questions that you would ask as someone coming to Drupal for the first time, like, how do I install it? What is a node? What is what is an entity? And yeah, so it's great for Drupal, I think, that it's bringing in new people.
So, okay. So, yeah. Now we talk a bit of code. So it's built as a profile. It's a distribution. And we've made it as easy as possible just to install the whole thing. This one gives the Lando instructions, but it's a project that lots of development agencies are involved in. So there's a DDev template. I think there is also, because Anatech use Doxel, I think Doxel's in there as well. And because lots of the councils are really rubbish and don't let their developers install anything on their machines, there's also a Gitpod installation of it. But anyway, that will just fire up. It's a distribution. You just use Composer, and then it's a profile. We will be moving to recipes. The distribution is also on Drupal.org, but we're not very good at updating it because
Sorry,
the actual code is on GitHub.
I will update it today.
If anyone's got a good way of synchronizing GitHub and Drupal.org, we should move to GitLab. People want the issue credits because
we are planning to move to Drupal.org more fully. We have like 70 repositories on GitHub, so it's kind of, and lots of issues. But I was talking to Nick at the GitLab session yesterday, and maybe there's a way to actually just migrate all the issues into GitLab on Drupal.org. So yeah, hopefully we can move away from GitHub and to Drupal.org fully and have all the niceness there.
There's definitely a push because of, so lots of the agencies are giving lots of their code away, and they'd like more visibility of the fact that they're contributing, which of course Drupal does really well. Drupal.org does really well, just some of the sharing and tools, and we started on GitHub. So if you want to find it, that's where it is. And there is some very nice documentation for getting you started. It's also one of the nice things about having lots of different agencies, people who want to contribute. People have spent quite a lot of time writing documentation, which makes it much easier to install. So, and then, yes, the features. So this is out of the box. You get almost all of these things. There is a demo version of it, which you'll see some of the recordings of the modules are based on. You just install the demo module and it just enables all these things. The original Hammersmith and Fulham or Kingston.
I think Brighton was the first one.
Okay.
I think it was Brighton.
Anyway, it was based around services. Alert banner we're going to look at in a moment because that's one thing that's useful in any site. Step by step is a very good example of some of the patterns that come from the government design system, which we'll also introduce in a moment. But there's so many things that council websites need. They need to show their events. We've built the search so it's pluggable, so it will work with the database backend in the first case, but there is also a default Solar thing, so you can swap it over and you have some decent defaults to get you started with Solar. There's blogs, the web forms. So web forms is an example of something that was contributed by a council. So Croydon Council needed their forms component before anyone else did. But web form, you can just make the most inaccessible, horrible forms with web form. So, and there is, we'll see, this government design system which spent lots of time deciding what an accessible form is and all the rest of it. So the web forms component is more locking down web form and making it so that you make accessible forms and people can't do crazy stuff. But yeah, so they needed that component, they developed it, they put it on GitHub, and it's not yet kind of prime time, so it's not yet in the distribution, but it's pointed out. publications I also mentioned was being made by Chicken because another council needed it, and it's kind of book module on steroids.
Kind of the idea of getting rid of PDFs. Councils like to just put things in PDFs and whack them up on their website, which are not very accessible and not very manageable. So yeah, HTML-based publications, which is an obvious thing to do with Drupal.
Yep. And then, yeah, there's some really specific stuff, which are the integrations, because, yeah, which differs for areas, but it depends on the external services that councils need to integrate with, which is, because like the Care Quality Commission and the Irish Service Catalogue and things like that are very specific. And I suspect, yeah, if you're rolling out in Belgium, there'll be overheads instances with their own websites that you need to integrate with or whatever. There's one that's dropped off the bottom down there, which is also a Sally checking, accessibility automate checking, which definitely helps for some of the microsite stuff that we'll see, because people can otherwise make colours that don't fit, all the rest of it. Anyway, so that's kind of the feature set that you can just get by doing that composer install and running the demo module. And yeah, it gives you a boost in, but you can install most of it separately. You do not actually need the profile. So an example of one that doesn't even depend on the core module at all, you can just install it, and you need it all over the place, is alert banners. So the original motivation for this is, it's a council, well, it was the thing that was used for announcing the death of the Queen, and then you have a full pop-up, and I think lots of them just had full black screen with a big picture of the Queen, and all that. But then you can click it away and it's gone. And then you can actually find out when your bins are going to be emptied. And the alerts are more for, yes, this service is, delayed because it's a public holiday, those kind of announcements that you need to see once, and then you click them away. I can put that up while it goes on in the background, so you can see this is literally the demo installation. If you install the demo module, you get this, and you can see there's the banners that you can just hide, and they've gone away. So I've rolled this out on other sites because people want to, announce their upcoming event. They want to get someone to subscribe to their newsletter and all those things. It's really handy, and it doesn't depend on LocalGov Drupal at all. And the way it was built, so yeah, it's on GitHub. We've not got this one on Drupal.org yet.
We should do.
The way it's built, if just let it run, you have alert banners that are entities on their own, and they have conditions on them, so you can just say where they appear on the site. And the type of alert, that's the defaults, but you can choose your own, like newsletter subscription, or, offensive pop-up that gets really in the way, ones that don't get in the way, whatever you want. And yeah, and then it will then decide where to put them on, and it's a block that actually displays it. So.
And that's when we should get up on Drupal.org, but also it's not specific to local government. So yeah, we've got this kind of we've created it called LocalGov Alert Banner, but really it should just be Alert Banner because it's not that specific. It's really useful for lots of sites.
So another one, and this stands in for a whole bunch of the other modules like guides, because in fact it's an implementation of the UK government design pattern. And it's for all those cases where you need people to go through a thing in the correct order. And so it will have steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. How these steps are presented with the thing on the side and the sub-steps and all the information is heavily researched by the UK central government, and they put all this information up on a website, which is my other useful place that you can steal things that are really useful. There is a UK government design system. They spend lots of money doing research. They even put some of the user research up now. In the beginning, they weren't being so good. Now they're actually linking to the original research, so you can say, no, you know, people went off and, you know, they actually did user studies and they've had people and watched them and all the rest of it. And they've put it all up. It is also like an open source, I don't know, is it Python-based something? I'm not sure what it's actually in, that you can integrate with a particular government system, but we have just had to re-implement the patterns in Drupal. And the step-by-step was one of them. But yeah, it's also full of stuff like, if you have a form, you should include an option for none. Always allow users to change their names. This is how you should show the error messages. It's absolutely chock full of that, and link on the slide at the end. And so that's one of my, and so with lots of the modules that we ship with do follow those patterns that have all that user research, but it's also just, if you have to do front end stuff and you need to convince someone that they want something more straightforward, simple, clean, it's a good one. Okay, so directories. This is another component that doesn't really depend actually on the distribution at all. You can install it on its own. The need here is content designer driven, faceted search, and directories. So the developers aren't rolling out a new directory. The developers are not adding a new facet type. The content editors are driving it. So if you're importing your data from somewhere else, it's actually a bit of a pain. If people are editing it directly on the website, it's the thing. And it's also pre-configures itself as you go along, which is, just makes it really easy to roll out directories that look like this. And you can see why councils need this kind of stuff, because they want to put up their councils, they want to say where their libraries are, they want to show all the rest of it. And I'll just let that run and kind of talk through how it was done. So what you'll see is, so this is a directory. The directory is a node, that's it, and it has the configuration for how the directory works, what kind of facets are enabled on it. So the content editor could just say, no, it's also got this facet on it, and they'll then be able to select it. And the content type entries, you can make new ones. So a developer can make a new content type to say it's in this directory, and all they do is add the entity reference field to the directory page, and it auto-wires everything. So it keeps it really, even for the developers in these councils, it keeps it really low maintenance for them. They just need to know how to make a content type, slap a field on it, and automatically it wires itself up to be able to display the facets, to have the correct fields on it, everything. So that was the reasoning behind it. And this is me adding a facet into it. And I think the thing will also add another facet type in the next section. So there it is, and then facilities, and then it can be used.
So I think this is something that came out of other competitor website systems where content designers were used to be able to create their own directories, add lots of facets, and do all of this. But obviously in Drupal, out of the box, that's more of a developer job. So if you needed to add a new directory type with different facets, different filterable options, then that's a whole dev task. So this moves it from being a dev task to being a content task, which is
you don't have to place the blocks on the side. The facets will automatically appear when you've enabled them as their content. And there you can see the design. That's the GDS checkboxes, really huge. So That's Directories. And one thing that did come out of Directories that has gone onto Drupal.org that isn't prefixed with LocalGov Drupal and you can reuse is the geo entity. So as you saw on there, and councils have an amazing amount of geographic data, particularly, we made an entity type that makes the geographic data, addresses or areas, reusable. So it's like, well, you'll see, it's like the media entity, because actually you want to have the same venue and the details about the accessibility of the venue and the opening times of the venue and all those kind of things on an entity, and then when you show the library in the directory, you can show the library's location and its accessibility, but when you've got an event that's happening at the library, you also want to show what the accessibility information is, and you don't want to have to re-enter that geographic data each time. So it's basically just an opinionated entity type that has been wired in to, already configured to have location on it. So that had just selected an existing location and placed it on, but you can also create a new one. This is the old version of the form. There's another slide in a moment with the new version of this form, but it has an autocomplete on it. And yeah, so then people can make new addresses, add in accessibility. You choose the additional fields, whatever you want. So yeah, it has entity type. You can add additional fields. There is already an external ID one because everybody who's importing, lots of the councils have got their own actual geographic data departments, and we need to actually import the locations from their external system. It has the external ID in it, and yeah, but it means we're reusing the information that's correct and they keep it up to date. But for the people who are entering it themselves, the autocomplete is using the, I've forgotten the name now, geocoder module. So there's loads of plugins for GeoPHP, so you can choose which, and most of the councils in the UK, because they're the custodian of the information, they use the equivalent of the cadastre. They get free access to it, which is called an ordnance survey. So they replace the Photon OpenStreetMap geocoder with the one for ordnance survey, and they have the correct government data. But you can use whichever free or not free geocoder you want, replace it, and it does. Assuming the license, you can't use OpenStreetMap nominatim to do autocomplete, or you shouldn't, but Photon you can. Anyway, and so this is where we are. So slightly more up-to-date version. Belgium, Odyssey, yes. There we go. And yeah, handy. Creates a geo entity that you can reuse anywhere on your site.
And of course, that allows us to have multiple locations for a given directory entry, which is quite useful.
So that came out of Directories, but we realised that we're reusing them all over the site, and particularly stuff like the accessibility information. And that one did get onto Drupal.org. We did have to rename it from LocalGov Geo. Renaming entities is a pain. I do not want to do this again, but we managed, and it's up. And maintainers be us.
Seems to be so. But yeah, the important thing there is to name things right in the first instance. Don't name things wrong, because changing names, fields, entities is a pain when you've got lots of people using your modules.
LocalGov, alert banner.
Well, when we put it up on Drupal.org, maybe we should just call it alert banner.
So microsites. So that was individual modules. There are more individual modules, but they're kind of a snapshot of things that you can just pick and mix. I suspect rolling out directories will get easier even still once we can turn them into a recipe. So we can have one recipe for deploying the whole site, and we can have other recipes. At the moment, it all sits in the modules. So the drive for microsites. So this is where my slides are on GitHub. Finn's pushed loads of pictures in, so I'm going to let you talk through all this.
So microsites is a separate distribution, but building on lots of the same core content types and functionality that we've seen on LocalGov Drupal. But councils need lots of different little sites, and some councils have like hundreds of microsites on WordPress, Wix, different things like this. So it's an obvious need. We need to maintain our microsites and not necessarily have them on lots of different systems, so why not build it in Drupal and have it? So the microsite system is a distribution built on group and domain to allow one Drupal site to control however many microsites. And there's lots of live microsites. What we can see up here is different councils who have used the microsites distribution to publish fostering sites, publication sites, directory sites, where they don't want this content to be on the main website for some reason, so often a branding reason or a collaboration reason, or it's more promotional content, it's not necessarily just service content.
And the technical desire here is those tech teams that I was talking about, big and small, getting very upset with all the Wix and WordPress and unmaintained things that get spun up by a department and then get forgotten about and don't get maintained, and they want they would prefer everything in the main website and hold it in and rein it in, and you can't change anything. But
sometimes somebody has a need to do something a little bit different and have it, maybe not council branded or more imagey, more promotional.
Yeah. So yes, this was built with group and domain, so we can go back to the technical bit. So group module is actually deciding who the users are on the microsite. Group module is deciding what the content type is. It's using group 3, so any entity, including config entities, can be actually in the group, so they're in the microsite, and then the domain is tied into the group. And then quite some time has been spent on making a simple dashboard to make it really easy for people to maintain, so it's taking away the whole Drupal experience. I can discuss separately about places that want to put the Drupal experience back in again, but keeping it very simple to roll out individual sites. And I think this is the next one. So we've already seen a fair bit of the thing, but yeah, you can see the users, the content, everything the content editor or the microsite manager needs is just on that. It's actually the group page. It's not the Drupal page. Demo, which is me recorded, so I don't have to do anything. I think this one just logs into so we have the idea of a control site, which is the site that does not have a group on it, where you can edit the microsites. You just fire up the name of the microsite. You give it a domain. This is the biggest problem we have with councils, because they have really complicated rules about getting subdomains or domains or whatever, so it's actually hardest to get them pointed at the machine. But once you've done that, you hit that. It takes a moment because it's actually generating default content to get the content editors started. You can add a user, or the microsite admins themselves can invite users by email, which is just using the group invite module. So it sends out an invite with a link that you click on, and it generates an account in the Drupal site and adds them to the group, and then they can manage it itself. This is the default content that comes along, which is kind of nice. And the user that I just created can log in and is the administrator of the site, and you'll see that group admin again. Yes, and then Mark from Anatech, who is now freelance available for hire, advertise, who's a very good front end, and he's also doing some core front end development. So he's one of the core. Is he maintainer of one bit or another? Okay, anyway, has made this. You can swap the theme completely if you want. So each microsite can have its own theme, or it comes with a theme that is highly configurable. So basically people can roll out the same theme, but change the colors on it, change the font on it, and everything else. If people need more than that, you just say, this microsite has a different theme. And then you get someone to design a Drupal theme. But if you want to, you can just, and the colors I pick on this, I'm sorry, they're horrific. And I think it then
you can create some really ugly sites very quickly. But that's where, do you show the Sally?
The Sally stuff was at the top.
Okay.
Of that, and yeah, it will point out the fact that this is really inaccessible and you should not do this.
So, with great power comes great responsibility, obviously, and accessibility is really important for everyone, especially councils who maybe are sort of more legally bound to provide accessible sites. So the Sally module really helps content designers to spot contrast errors or H1s, H2s not being in the right order, or that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's proved very popular with the council content designers.
Okay, and a very quick deep dive into what technically happened. There was a domain group module, and I made a 3.x version that worked with group 3. I ended up doing really horrible things with entity query alter to make an inner join to enforce the group membership with the domain, so that you never got the content on other sites. But I'm pleased to say all that work has gone in the bin. Well, it's on GitLab. If you want it, you can have it. Because there's a much better way of doing it, because Christian's a lot cleverer than I am. Christian's made the group module maintainer and cache subsystem maintainer has made a module called group sites. And group sites is completely generic. The sites could be on a subdomain, they could be whatever you want, but it will tie group to a context. In this case, the context is the domain. So he's got a group context domain module that does that, which is just tiny. It's literally just says, go to group module, find out if there's a domain, attach it to this group. And underneath, it uses the variation cache and the permissions, so that every time it goes, oh, it's a domain context. What permissions does this user in this group have? And that ties it to the microsite. So each microsite has a completely different set of permissions based on your user on that site, which is using that new stuff that just got presented yesterday, if you were at that session, which was why I asked the question about the permissions, because I've watched it and kind of gone, oh, well, I should have thought of that, but no. That's why we can reuse other people's work. So it's great. So that's what's happening underneath. And it's got really neat and clean now, using the group sites and using the variation cache. Okie doke. So the slides is the top bold one. So if you want to go back through or pick up any of the links like the GDS and the so forth, actually the government design system is also linked there. Okay, are there any questions after that? So we've done the community, we've done the modules you can pinch, and we've done the microsites. Yes, the box. I am worse at throwing than anyone else. Ah, not bad.
Perfect. I have a question from somebody watching the live stream in Malaysia, actually, who you might know. His name is Akmal Fikri. And Akmal's been trying to convince the Malaysian government to use this, because Malaysian government is huge and they have a large number of websites that are all very dated, horrible accessibility, and they're all on Drupal 7. So this could be the perfect solution for them. The problem is how to convince them without getting any very expensive foreign Western agency involved. Do you have any advice for him? I hope I got your question correctly, Akmal, if you're watching. Do you have any advice for him on how to get the ball rolling in countries like Malaysia?
Well, they're already using Drupal, which is a great start, right? So I think maybe it's not about convincing them to use Drupal. If they've got lots of sites there on Drupal 7, then there's an imperative to upgrade them quite soon. So I guess there is that. But I mean, if you weren't using Drupal already, and you're trying to convince government or public sector to use Drupal and to start using a distribution like this and start collaborating, I think it's about the sort of evidence of the amount of money that you'd save or the value that you'd get. When we started up, when we got funding originally from the local digital fund in the UK, we had access to an economist to assess the amount of money that was spent on proprietary software, on maintaining websites, and then analyze how much would be saved over a 5-year period, and actually do some economic argument for actually this could end up saving the public sector between 20 and 50 million pounds over a 5-year period if we had 100 councils sharing code and collaborating, which is significant money for the public sector. So I think there are economic arguments, and there is evidence out there that it makes sense.
I think some of that stuff's on the LocalGovDrupal.org website.
Yeah, so
already.
Definitely worth doing. But also, reach out to us at localgovdrupal.org. Eeks, me, Finn. We can try and help. I guess it'd be good to collaborate. There are. It's not just the UK. There are people doing it in Ireland. There are people in the US who have used some of what we're doing, and replicating the model. So, yeah.
And there are now a couple of people working more on the community end of it, who you can get hello at localgovdrupal.org, who will also be able to point you at other people who can help on that. So not just us two, but there's other people as well.
All right.
So it's worth reaching out on the contact, I'd say.
Thank you. It's a double-edged sword, I guess, because it would also, once they do choose for this, that would also create a very nice incentive for local open source developers to work on this, right? So you instantly create an open source opportunity in that region or country. So very nice.
Exactly, and we're seeing that in the UK. We're seeing a lot more people coming into the Drupal community who previously weren't doing Drupal, and so it's kind of like stimulating new blood, growth in Drupal in that area. It's important to train new people up, and I think it would be a good thing for any government to start using Drupal.
All right, thanks.
Anyone else? No? Yep.
Did you do anything to how the people edit the pages and stuff? Are you using layout builder for this, or?
Right. Yeah. So most of it is layout paragraphs, which was one of those technical discussions where a decision had to be made.
So for the core LocalGov Drupal distribution, the main service content types are text-based, no kind of layout, no images, and that's based off research from government digital services, the design system, and most people looking for information on their bins or how to pay their council tax, they want to be distracted by like calls to action or layout or they just want the information. And so the core of it was very just text, let's not have any images. But then obviously people need some different things for like promoting fostering or promoting different, which is where some of the more image-based layouts. So there's subsites within the core distribution which allows for that, and that's where layout paragraphs come in. So I don't know if you're familiar with layout paragraphs. It's kind of like you've got a paragraph, you can do layouts within that and add different paragraphs, different components within there. So not using layout builder in a full, sort of overriding the whole page, but using it within the content.
But
area.
and quite a lot of, or several councils are then introducing the same layout paragraphs field into their services content type because they don't want to follow keep it nice and clean and simple, and they want to add in more images or whatever. But yeah, that was at the time the best way of going about getting in slightly more complicated layouts and all the rest of it. It does mean that there's paragraphs in there, and there is a paragraphs module that I think is a dependency suck that's horrible and wants breaking up.
But the microsites is very much geared towards that as well. So where people need to do layout and custom, then the microsites is using all the layout paragraphs.
And do you get any feedback from the people that are actually using this? Because paragraphs is mostly like more complicated than putting your site together with blocks using layout builder.
We did some research. I mean, we do kind of the community of content designers that we had at the time, and that's what led to layout paragraphs over layout builder, or just content types. So it's a kind of halfway house, I guess, between the two. They seem to like it. You heard any other feedback on?
No.
But we have, like you mentioned, the community. We have a sort of content group of content designers, and one of the sort of missions this year is to try and improve the UX of content design. So we have constant feedback of things that people want to improve, and it's not usually around the layout stuff. It's usually around how CK editor works, or just the process of creating content and various things. But we're constantly listening and iterating.
It's not really hard baked into the system except all the paragraph types, which then cause dependencies, which breaking up would work. But actually you could most of the LocalGov Drupal you could, I think Brighton are slightly more, because they're a bit more query, and also are looking more at using page builder and things like that. So it's quite possible to do.
And maybe another question: is there anything like content sharing between the sites?
On the microsites, no. There was a sort of potential user need when we were doing the sort of research and discovery phase, but when that was interrogated, it's like, really? Do you really need to share content? Like, if you do really need to share content, we could probably do it in different ways, but the complexities of having a piece of content on multiple microsites, I think, massively outweighs the need. It's very rare that somebody really needs that, and there are other ways, RSS feeds or duplicating the content or whatever. I think, and actually the need hasn't come up again. So I think it was an idea of a need that wasn't a real need.
It's completely technically possible, but the whole thing was try and keep the user interface simple and keep things down, and that makes a big difference.
And conceptually simple as well.
Yeah.
Let's just have the content and the users for each site separate, and that's the main use case. But you could do it. There's nothing to stop you having content, in multiple groups, but it becomes a pain. I've deleted it here and it's gone from everywhere. That's how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Otherwise, we're already about 7 minutes over. So,
Another
one.
question,
Yep. No. Okay. Yeah. If people are happy with us continuing to run over.
A quick one. Sorry to keep you from your lunch, but. You've mentioned a couple of times, sorry if I've missed this, but you've mentioned that it's install profiles. Are there any plans to turn it into a recipe, or is it not possible?
There's almost nothing in, there's almost no code in the install profile. There's one core issue that's blocking the recipe. I can't remember exactly what it was. Somebody else was looking at that, but yes. And then because most of the stuff you can just install as modules without the profile anyway, it's just that we've got like code in the install hooks or the modules installed hook. So when you install another module, the modules know about each other and they kind of go, oh yeah, that means you've installed services. I'll add the services field to this content type. So we're already actually doing that outside of the profile anyway. So it should go to recipes relatively easily.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.